Hello, listeners. Welcome back to episode 7 of In Our Bodies. As always, this is your host, Henry. If you don't already know, this is a podcast made for and by people of color who identify as disabled, chronically ill, and or neurodivergent. Our lives are important, goddammit, so I'm going to record us talking about it. I can't believe we're already at episode 7. Well, more accurate to say that this is part 1 of 2 parts of episode 7. Our conversation with artist and cultural worker Chanika Svetvilas had so much good stuff, it needed to be 2 whole parts, okay? All right then, without further ado, here is part 1. Hi everyone, I am so excited to introduce our guest for this episode, Chanika Svetvilas. Chanika uses she, her pronouns. She is an American interdisciplinary artist and cultural worker. I know her best from her works and sculptures exploring medical accessibility, along with the contradictory notions of well-being versus the other side of medical side effects and medical stigma. The list is much longer than this, but Chanika also has past projects exploring stories of immigrant history in New York. She was also the co-founder of Thai Links, a collective bringing awareness to Thai issues, and the New York's first Thai film festival. There's also so much other cool stuff. Please go check her out after this episode. Welcome, Chanika.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Henry, and for inviting me to be a part of your podcast. I'm also zooming in from Lenni Lenape territory, the ancestral lands of Lenni Lenape people, and it's also known as Princeton, New Jersey, northeast of the United States.
Nice. Land acknowledgements. Always love that. Always learning about the indigenous lands that we occupy living in North America. Yes. Thank you for that. Just wanting to jump in, I guess, from the little bit of research that I've done about your work, but also who you are. You are a big mental health advocate and a big disabilities advocate. I think it is publicly known or known through at least a little research I was able to do that you have bipolar. And I think one of the first questions I wanted to ask is just to get to know a little bit more about what it is what does your daily life look like as somebody who has bipolar? I think that there is, I don't know, a lot of misconceptions. There's just a lot of like weird kind of like sensationalized portrayals or demonization of something like bipolar. And I'm just very curious as to what it is your experience is like day to day.
Thank you for that question. So I have a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, but that's just a way for me to name the condition. And I think having a DSM diagnosis, the Diagnostic Manual of Psychiatric Disorders, which is also has its own controversies
Yeah.
in terms of naming. It
Indeed.
does allow me to have access to psychiatric care, which is what I choose to have access to. I mean, there's different ways that people choose to uh, support their mental health condition.
Mm-hmm.
And I have chosen to receive psychiatric care, and I do use medication, which I take daily. I always say that the way I feel my being is sort of on the spectrum in terms of it fluctuating from day to day
Mm-hmm.
and within a day. Or sometimes I say it's a ratio of where I'm at and how many spoons I have, which,
Mm-hmm.
in the disability community, we talk about uh, the amount of energy we feel is the amount of spoons that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sometimes I have less spoons, and sometimes I'm doing okay.
Mm-hmm.
And um, day to day, I actually have a remote job currently as a temporary admissions administrator for a nonprofit organization that supports um, youth entering uh, schools that can provide more resources to underserved youth. And I've been actually working as a temporary worker for about 3 going on 4 years.
Mm,
I had a job at a university, and I was laid off due to the pandemic.
okay.
But I was working there temporarily, and it was very jarring for the temporary workers and contracted workers because we were not given an apology or any support,
Yeah.
and we were just not respected as what we contributed, um,
Mm,
filling the gaps. We were pretty much expendable.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I think a part of being a temporary worker or contracted worker is that you do not usually have access to healthcare benefits,
Yeah.
like health insurance, or even if it's a health insurance that a temporary agency may provide, or if you're lucky enough to afford health insurance, it's usually not necessarily the best insurance. Like the
Mm.
primary care physician is an hour away,
Oh my
um,
gosh.
or you don't have access to medication because you might not be able to include it in your plan,
Yeah.
or even if you have access to the care, um, you might not have the person you want, but it's just the person that's in network. And in New Jersey, only 49% of psychiatric providers accept health insurance. So
Okay.
you could have health insurance and not be able to afford a psychiatric provider, like a
Okay.
psychiatrist. Um, and only 5% in the United States are people of color who are providers in that field.
That is so disheartening to hear in terms of the kind of care, especially as a person of color, possibly often trying to find like healthcare providers
Mhm.
who, I don't know, try to. It's not a hard and fast rule for me, but I often like to have therapists who can kind of at least understand the realm of my
Mhm.
experience. And
Mhm.
I don't, sometimes I don't think like somebody who is like a straight white man is
Mhm.
somebody that I look for in my mental health care. And it's
Mhm.
very disheartening to hear that it's just such a small percentage and the accessibility is really not there, right? Um, I wanted to ask about more specifically kind of what are the kind of like mental states you experience, some like I think I just to give you an example, like some days I'll wake up and like it doesn't matter how I think I go to sleep thinking, okay, it's gonna be a good day, I'm gonna try to give myself as much structure and whatever, and sometimes I'll wake up and like dread will just overcome me and I'll just have to stay in bed. I'm not formally diagnosed in any particular way, but it is very clear that I like suffer or deal with my mental health in one way or another. But that's kind of like my day to day experience. It's like
Mhm.
sometimes quite big up and downs in ways that I don't think I can understand very well. Yeah, what are your mental states kind of like?
Mhm. Sometimes it's sleeping a lot.
Mm, okay.
It's about this, not being able to really get out. And so especially during the pandemic, it can be very isolating because you're already, I mean, during the beginning of the pandemic, you're already asked to isolate,
Hmm.
and uh, and for me, I was away from family because of the pandemic, as well as friends. And so um, it was immobilizing at times.
Mm,
Um, and I'm really thankful that I was able to find a way to continue to do my art, because I do feel like I was able to process what
mm,
I was feeling. And also, it was a way for me to be active, even if I wasn't, so I had this relationship with my art, even if
mm,
my person-to-person relationships were not active in person.
mm,
um, and I think part of it is also trying to be physical. I mean, in terms of just getting out and exercising and being in my body. And I think
mm,
sometimes when I'm feeling out of it, when I'm feeling the word that's often used as depressed is
mm,
it's hard for me to feel my body and to um, uh, I'm just all in my head. And I think for in creating my art, what was new for me during the pandemic is looking at how I was embodying my practice and to try to get out
mm,
of my head.
mm.
So I literally would dance and make dance videos.
I saw
um,
them. They're great.
because I was like, because I think because I'm focused on my, in my art, I was more focused on my mental health difference in describing
Mm,
that experience. And then I'm also a visual artist. It's just like, it's so cerebral. And
yeah.
I wanted to be more aware of how my mind is connected to my body, and
Mm,
how I was embodying that experience, and how my state of mind was impacting um, my my body,
mm,
um, and how I was feeling it in my muscles. And another thing was I was aware of, because of former President Trump calling it the Chinese virus and
mm,
stigmatizing it, um, uh, instead of just saying it's COVID-19, and the anti-Asian violence that occurred. I was very, and I think in the United States, other Asian Americans were feeling this. I was very hyper aware of my surroundings and very
mm,
self-conscious about every sneeze and every cough. And so I could just feel my muscles contract, trying to, tense up and trying to hold everything in, because
mm,
I
mm.
didn't want people looking at me, or um, so it's like I could feel that tension in my body.
Yeah.
Um, and and then there are times when I can be a little um, hyper hypermatic, so
Yeah.
my moods change, and then it's hard for me to read and concentrate or
Okay.
focus. um, and then I can be a little bit all over the place. But I'm not always. I mean, it's interesting to reflect and try to describe what I feel, because when I'm in it, I'm not really. It's hard to observe, although it's something that I'm trying to learn to do. When we were
Mm,
speaking earlier about how I was feeling today, and I mentioned I was feeling a bit sluggish.
mhm.
And I think trying to be a little bit more observant of my states of being is a way to give myself self care and support, so that I'm not forcing myself to be a certain way or to match, or as you described,
Yeah.
mirroring someone else's behavior, but
Yeah.
allowing myself to just be. So that's something I'm trying to learn to do,
Do you
because I don't,
ever
yeah.
do you ever find sometimes, and I know that it's not just like one feeling or the other, but when you seemingly change from like manic states to depressive states, are they ever jarring to you? Do you like have a hard time connecting kind of your experiences from like both perspectives? Does that make sense? Like, can you remember how you're feeling in your depressive states when you're kind of like in more manic states?
Well, sometimes it's simultaneous. I mean,
Oh,
I
interesting.
yeah, I mean, I'm actually diagnosed as someone who's mixed. So I can actually
Interesting.
feel high and low at the same time.
Wow. Okay.
Uh, so it's, which is kind of confusing.
Right.
Like I could be, um, crying incessantly, but at the same time feel a certain elation about what's around me.
Interesting.
Yeah. Um, it's, I mean, sometimes I can remember what I felt, but when I'm in it, it is hard to um, be observant of it.
Mm.
That's when I'm in more of an extreme
Mm-hmm.
instance. And I'm trying to cultivate that awareness so that um, I don't um, escalate into a more extreme state. So I'm, being more present
Mm-hmm.
because I can
Is
get
there
carried away.
is there a certain amount of like, does awareness help with escalation to a point where you don't enjoy? Does that is that is that helpful? Is it helpful to be aware of your kind of your state of mind so it can continue to be somewhere that is comfortable for yourself? Like, what happens when you're not aware
Mhm.
of where you are?
Well, I did choose to take medication, and one of the
Mm,
medications is an antipsychotic. And so far, it's worked for me, and it's something that I've chosen to take. I've been on the same medication for the past um, 10 years or so.
mm.
But it took a while to find the right mix, or as some of us call it, the right cocktail.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and it was a long journey to get to that point because I had experienced a lot of medication side effects that were extremely disabling before
Mm,
I found something that was supportive. Um, and I think because I found the right mix, um, it's less uh, less inhibiting in terms of day to day,
mm, mhm,
and
mhm,
it's I feel it's easier for me to be self reflective and um, and still be myself. Although there are times when, as I spoke earlier, when I want to be a certain way and I'm not.
yeah,
But it is a matter of just allowing myself to be the way I feel and not fighting
yeah.
it.
I feel like I'm learning that it's constantly this collaboration of parts of my body that parts of my body or my mind that I don't really have that much control over, and kind of my present state of mind that I embody and am conscious of. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like, yeah, there's just parts that are like you just can't control, or when you do, it seems to be more, at least for me, emotion of like bottling up that ends up not well at the end of the journey. So there's just like parts if you release that control, and I guess as you were saying, just try to like be aware and observe and kind of
Mhm.
just be slow in yourself. It seems to
Mhm.
be maybe a more effective way than to push and to hold tight.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Um,
love the word collaborate. Yeah, I
yeah,
like that idea of that I'm collaborating with my body and mind and state of being, not beating myself up, but
yeah,
being up in partner with
yeah,
um, myself.
yeah. Because sometimes you're just like, come on, work with me.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's
um,
why some people have pushed back a little bit on the word resilience because it's used so often.
yeah.
And there's expectation that you just have to fight through and rise above, and without acknowledging that in order to do so, you do need that community support and access
Hmm.
to resources. It's
Yeah,
not as simple as just, being resilient. There's more to it than that.
yeah. It's more than just like like resilience to me. I think harkens ideas of like toughing it through, and
Mm,
to me that I think there is. It seems to be a certain amount of compromising of oneself for the outward notion of being okay, getting through something, but like
mhm,
at what cost really only the personal the only your own person can know, right? Like
mhm,
yeah.
mhm. Yeah.
Something else I wanted to ask you is what your definition of mad pride is. And for listeners who don't really know what mad pride is, I just want to kind of like do a little preface. Mad pride is kind of the reclamation of this idea of madness being something that is clearly seen as um, not good in our society. You know, the ideas of crazy and madness is those who we often try to lock up, and often people that we allow to be harmed or have their human rights taken away in ways that we don't do to people we consider sane. So there are people on this world that are, trying to have pride in their madness and have this idea that they deserve humanity and respect just the same. That's my understanding of kind of like mad pride. But I wanted to know kind of what it is for you and how you've maybe come about it, or I don't know what your 2 cents about it is.
Mhm. Well, thank you for introducing the term. It is actually also a movement that started in
Yes.
the 90s.
Okay, good. I was like, I don't have any historical context. I'm sorry, this is like super vague.
That's okay. In Toronto, Canada, and
Yeah.
it spread out through the world
Yeah, I could see that.
to be proud of and embrace our mental health differences, and to
Mm,
not be ashamed of it, because there is so much stigma when you have still when you have a mental health condition. Um, and for me, I came about it around the same time I became aware of disability studies.
mm,
I experienced stigma and self stigma and internalized ableism when I had the diagnosis of bipolar disorder in my
mm,
20s.
okay.
I felt I didn't want to even accept that I had a mental health condition that I needed support for and that I needed to maintain myself.
Mhm,
And it was that roller coaster of hospitalization, uh, that, and my extreme states of being, um, because I didn't also recognize uh, what I or acknowledge for myself what I was experiencing. My
mm,
um, to understand it was a part of my experience. I just pretended it wasn't a part of my life.
yeah.
Um, and it wasn't until my last hospitalization, which was in 2010, and I was in graduate school, that I finally acknowledged that the bipolar disorder was a part of me.
Mm.
And it was because of this discrimination that I experienced in graduate school when I was pursuing my Master of Fine Art, and was kicked out of graduate school after my hospitalization by my thesis
No
committee.
way.
So, because of that discrimination, and then filing a case of discrimination with the Civil Rights Commission in Ohio, where I was, that it mobilized me. Um,
Good for you.
and it was that mobilization that recognized that I was also part of a community, because I realized that my case wasn't unique, but it's something that others have
Mm.
experienced.
Mm.
And I really embraced the disability community I was a part of, and learned about other people's lived experiences. And at that time, it was really a fight for my rights.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and then there was this shift when I entered another graduate program, and had Petra Kuppers as an advisor. So Petra Kuppers is a disability justice advocate, performer, writer, poet, disability
Cool.
studies professor. Um,
Amazing.
she's just amazing, and she was my um, uh, catalyst, um, uh, and mentor, who exposed me to disability studies, um, and also through disability studies, learning what language I wanted to claim for myself.
Mm.
And I didn't want to say I was mentally ill, because it's a condition that fluctuates, and it's not like I'm in a constant state of illness.
Mm.
But also, that's a label that's put upon me. It's not how I want to describe myself.
Mm.
And so I started using the phrase mental health difference as a way
Mm.
to reflect the different states of being that fluctuates for me. And then, through that time, learning about Mad Pride, and that Mad Pride is also has also blossomed into Mad Studies. That there's a
Mm.
whole discipline that focuses on the lived experiences of Mad Pride. Um, and during the pandemic, was when I first learned about Sins Invalid in the
Yes.
United States.
Yes.
And there are 10 principles of disability justice.
Mm.
And that helped me shift also, in terms of focusing more on disability justice and not just disability rights, but understanding that I'm part of a community that's intersectional and interdependent, and that
Yeah.
no one is left behind.
Yeah.
Um, and I wanted to continue to embrace um, whom I was in all parts of my identity. And I self identified as having a disability. I self identified as having mad pride, because I wanted to embrace that community, acknowledge I was part of that community, and also create work for my community. That
Mm.
the lens I wanted to create my art for um, wouldn't be for raising the awareness of the oppressor, but
Yeah.
for my community, that they can
Yeah.
self-identify, and that I could create, hopefully, a safe space for people to engage with the conversation of our experiences.
Yeah. That's a really great way to be looking at kind of motivations of like how to and who to be creating work for, right? I think I'm definitely continuously still on that journey as well. I think sometimes it's so hard seeing the kind of work that is around us and who so much art, media, whatever is created for, who is in front of it, who we're told to model. And sometimes I wonder if anybody is going to care about the things I talk about or stuff like that. But I don't know. As I'm sure you also feel, it's just there's enough of us that I think it's important. I don't know all of you. I don't know everyone yet, but like I think it's important to us enough and to our experiences enough that it's worth talking about. Um, Something that you specifically wanted to talk about, and I would love to talk to you about, is the intersections of your identity. And I would be so remiss on this podcast that champions talking to POCs not to talk about, yeah, kind of the intersections beyond just like mad pride and other stuff like that, but maybe like ethnic intersections. And obviously, as somebody who is a person of color living in America, just however you want to be talking about it.
Well, I think in the United States, there is this tendency, although I do feel there's a shift now, but to silo identities, especially race. And I do find that in spaces that, like for instance, for Asian American spaces, disability access is not always included, or it's not, and additionally, it's not a part of the conversation.
No.
And I often feel that as someone who self-identifies as having a disability, I have to take it upon myself to educate or to question those spaces or to provide prompting, and I have to take initiative. And I'd like to feel that I'm not the only one in that space that's trying to make that effort, that it is already part of the default, to make things accessible. And I would hope that that in any space, every community is included. And also because we all identify with different aspects of our identity, and you shouldn't exclude one separate from the other, because it's a part of our lived experience, and we can't separate different aspects of ourselves and bring only one part of our identity to a space. And so all aspects of ourselves should be respected and embraced.
Guys, that is it for part 1 of our conversation with Chanika. Chanika definitely has more to say about how she experiences her life at the intersection, and we also delve deeper into Chanika's advocacy and art practices. Stay tuned. See you in part 2.